our conversation today, which is very, very CCT. So we're excited to jump in. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A. We will be addressing those at the end of each of the presentations. We'll go through the first presentation and the second presentation, then we'll do faculty remarks and our Q&A answers. If we do not make it to your question, we do have a record of those. What we'll do is we'll send those off to the author, have them answer them, and then we will post them on social media. So if you are not following us on Instagram or Facebook, please do so, and we'll be answering those there. In addition, as a reminder, the full articles that will be presented today will be published and available to the public on Friday, April 28th. So you'll be able to learn more there. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off with our first panel, Bots in Nation States, Reframing Social Media Impact. Both of these are very different papers, but they do have some overlap that we're super excited to explore. So our first presenter is Anna Quadra, who is presenting on an overview of misinformation and social media bots in Chile's 2022. And I'm going to be completely honest, I can't even say that word, Anna. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and the presentation, and we will move forward. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you, Erica. We can go ahead. Yeah, so I'm going to be presenting my paper. It's on basically polling in times of misinformation. So how the social media impact electoral processes. I did this paper for my Tech for Political Change class last semester. So it was a semester-long work trying to research and like a deep dive into what social media means for electoral processes. I chose to do it about the national plebiscite of Chile, which was held last September. So I'm gonna say a very short overview of what this means. So Chile held a national plebiscite on September 4, 2022. It was meant to determine if the public agreed to change the text of their current constitution. This constitution was drafted during the time of the Pinochet dictatorship, so it has a lot of sociocultural implications for the country. In the months before the plebiscite, there's some research done on evidence that floats of misinformation were found on social media, which confused the people about what this new text meant, and greatly affected the results of the plebiscite. Just so that sorry, I should have started by this. A plebiscite is basically when people vote yes or no to take a big political decision in a country. And in this case, it was whether they approved of the new text or rejected the new text. So basically, this paper explores the role of social media, more specifically social media bots, had in disseminating the political misinformation during the campaign for the plebiscite, and to understand better how misinformation and bots have quickly become a prominent element of online political culture. We can go into the next slide now. So just a little overview, social media bots are defined as accounts controlled by software that generate content and establish interactions on social media platforms. They are a phenomenon that are on the rise, especially with the prominence of social media platforms. And what makes them very hard to deal with is the fact that they are designed to mimic human behavior. So for people, it's very hard to be able to tell apart if this is a bot account, or if it's just a regular person that's tweeting nonstop all day. So malicious bots on social media platforms can be used for a range of things, from promoting terrorist propaganda to manipulating stock market and disseminating rumors and conspiracy theories, which is probably the most common one and the most we might all have encountered at some point. Like I said, they mimic human behavior. It's hard to distinguish them. And for the purpose of this paper, I tried to differentiate between what it's according to research, it's called transparent bots or cover bots. So transparent bots are bots that their purpose and objective is very clear, and they're used for that. For example, newspapers use transparent bots to automatically schedule news that are going to be tweeted throughout the day, so that it doesn't have to be a person tweeting out. There's also bots that translate stuff. You can ask Twitter bots, translate this, and they will give you the translated tweet. But these bots have very specific tasks, and they're like transparent about it. Cover bots are bots that try to mimic human behavior, try to pass out as humans, and they're mostly used to spread misinformation. And just to make it more clear, the reason why I was so interested in bots in electoral processes is there are already some preliminary research done in countries like the US in the elections of 2016, France, Sweden, Germany, Spain, and Brazil, that have been able to point out how like prominent the presence of social media bots was during these electoral processes. So what I wanted to do with this paper is try out if I could prove that they were also present in the Chilean plebiscite. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here I'm going to go like way too fast about what the 2022 national plebiscite is, because it's a complex phenomenon to explain. Like I said, it was a plebiscite aimed to determine if the public agreed with the newly drafted text for a political constitution. And it's important to mention that Chile has a very long history of political unrest and plebiscite. So this is like not the first plebiscite in the country. Actually, it comes after like the plebiscite of 2020, which decided that there was going to be a new text of the constitution drafted. And the whole process lasted more than 4 years. And at the end, in 2020, when they decided that they were going to vote for a new text, a political constitution convention was formed to draft the new text. And this new text focused highly on social rights, the environment, and gender disparity, while also paying particular attention to indigenous communities. And this is what caused the beginning of a misinformation campaign, because Chile, some of you may know, most of you might not, is a prominently conservative country since the ending of the Pinochet dictatorship. So when the Constitutional Convention started drafted this very focused on human rights, gender rights, and indigenous communities, it obviously like started a lot of like noise, and people were not like really comfortable with that. So yeah, before the plebiscite of September 4th, there were 3 months of campaign where misinformation flooded social medias. And what it started as like a very clear lead from the approval side, which meant that people were going to approve the new text, in less than 4 days quickly turned into a majority of like people rejecting the new text. So we can go on to the next slide. So I want to start by saying that this is very preliminary research that I did in the context of my class. So it's definitely, it's like a very small sample of tweets. And mostly what I wanted to see is what can we do to try to identify the social media bots in a way that researchers, people that are working on electoral processes and campaign can know what they're dealing with. So I started with 2 research questions. Question 1 is, can we identify a significant presence of bots on Twitter during the plebiscite campaign? And the second question was if the general narrative on Twitter was negative or positive towards the Constitution, and that would make me draw conclusions of whether this affected the final result. So if we go to the next question. So what I did was mostly a sentiment analysis. I think many of you have taken the sentiment analysis class, so you might know what this is. So to get a sample of tweets, so sentiment analysis is performed on either like RStudio or Python. I did RStudio. So what you do is that you take a sample of tweets and you operationalize this code package that is available in the internet. I use this uset package, like I said on my slide, which is available from the Comprehensive Archive Network. And what you do is that you input the data of your tweets, which I got through web scraping. Usually platforms like Twitter should put their API database available to the public, and you should be able to request to get a sample of tweets. But I did that process like as the first thing, and I didn't get an answer like fast enough for me to like proceed. I have like a very limited time for this. So I use an outsourced web scraping service called AP5. So basically what you do is like you input a specific variables where you want to get the tweets. So for me, it was like tweets collected from June 1st to September 1st, which were the months of the plebiscite campaign and using the main hashtags that were used for campaigning, which were apruebo and rechazo, which means approve and reject. So yeah, so the collected, once you do this, the web scraping process takes a little long because it web scrapes like all of the internet and then all of the Twitter, I mean. And because I was doing this through an outsourced site, I just got a sample of 2,656 extracted tweets, which is a small sample. That's what I said. Like this is like a very preliminary research. And yeah, we can go to the next slide. And after I ran these on this, like I said, the CUSET package in RStudio, I got my sentiment analysis results. So this is a sentiment analysis that I got. We can see that the negative, it's divided in 8 different variables. Positive, negative are the ones that take into account all of the tweets. And then those are also divided in trust, surprise, sadness, joy, fear, disgust, anticipation, and anger. We can see that the negative results, it's a little bit higher than the positive results, which was in line with what I thought that I was going to get as results. We can go to the next one. This sentiment analysis also gives you some other results like term frequency. We can let you know which were the terms most used. That I included also in my paper that's getting published next Friday. I couldn't like go through that right now because of the limited time. And I wanted to jump to the identifying bots through manual classification. So again, machine learning is like but it's being used mostly to do like this bots identification, sentiment analysis and stuff. But in this case, to perform a bot identification through Python or RStudio, you also need a Twitter API. So because I didn't have that, I talked with my professor, which was helping me out and advising me on my research. And we decided to use research that had already been done on how to identify bots and the parameters that must be taken into account to decide what a bot is, like a suspicious account, an anonymous account. So I identified bots through manual classification. And basically what I did is that I classified manually with like the already web scrape database one by one. So that's 2,656 tweets, which were around 1,000 accounts. And I identified manually the Twitter creation dates. Again, to create this table, which says which accounts were created when. And according to researchers from the Indiana University, which have created like Botometer, which is an identifying software, one of the first things to take into account to know if there's like accounts are likely to be bots is their creation date. So as you can see here, we have a very high increase of Twitter accounts creation dates during the beginning of the campaign for the national plebiscite. Which varies very much, but there's like a little peak in 2014, but that's like a long time ago. And you can see like the peak goes very high in 2022. So that was a very interesting to get. We can go to the next. So yeah, like I said, the Indiana University created this software called Botometer. And basically, if you cannot have access to the API to do this like in a bulk, where you just like input all the database, you can go one by one, classifying the accounts, and that's what I did. It's a long process because it's not meant to like do it for like that many accounts. But basically, yeah, so they have created like around 50 something variables that they take into account, and that gives you a 1 to 5 meter of like if an account is likely to be a bot or not. So here are like some differences. You can see it takes into account echo chambers, how many fake followers it has, if they paid ads, etc. And that's a difference between an account that didn't rank that high and an account that ranked very high. We can go to the next slide. So my key findings, and with this I'm going to wrap up. So my study found a high volume of negative opinions on social media towards the plebiscite, indicating an inclination towards rejection. I also analyzed one by one each tweets, and I could find that people were mainly talking about what the text of the Constitution meant, where there was like clearly some misinformation, and mostly about what it meant. People were talking about like immigration laws and like private market laws, and that switched the general contentment or disagreement with the Constitution. So far-right discourse was observed to have a significant impact on the public opinion shift and the plebiscite results. So the sentiment analysis revealed a higher overall negative sentiment, with fear, sadness, and anger being the dominant emotions. Like I said, in the term frequency, aprueba and rechazo were the most frequently used terms, and voto rechazo, which means I vote rejection or I vote against, was the most frequently term used. This suggests that the narratives created on social media around the text of the Constitution significantly impacted the shift in public opinion that occurred during late March and April. So the preliminary manual about detection of 2,655 tweets found that 124 accounts created between July 1st and 7th, indicating that there was a high anomalous Twitter activity. Again, those 125 accounts created are just in my small sample of tweets. So you can imagine if we kind of like amplify that to like a bigger sample. And just like some more things that I wanted to add, researching the presence of bots in social media is vital for understanding the presence of misinformation, its impact on political discourse, which is like, again, very important for like democratic processes. And by addressing this issue, we can work towards ensuring the integrity of democratic processes and preserving the authenticity of public discourse on social media platforms. So if we go again, like next slide, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I had to go very fast. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Just as a reminder, all of these articles, if you're interested in learning more, will be in the published journal on Friday. Dr. Owen, did you have a comment?
No, I just wanted to put up a clapping hand and I got a raised hand. It was a great presentation. I guess the only question I did have was this is like really interesting research. And I was just wondering if Anna saw any kind of similar kinds of discourse in any of the newspapers or any other kinds of, like, was it picked up by other types of media, the kinds of messaging that she was finding?
Yeah, actually, and I go a little bit like more deeply into this in my paper. There was the Investigative Journalist Observatory in Chile did like a very well documented kind of like picking up like newspapers, social media, and everything to represent that this was like a big phenomenon. So it was definitely like beyond social media, like it was in newspapers. Like I said, Chile is a very conservative country, is a very polarized country. So you can find newspapers and journals that are evidently far right, newspapers and journals that are evidently far left, and those pick up very different types of narratives. I mentioned that a little bit more in my paper. And another thing that I mentioned in the paper, which my professor Irene Wu suggested that it was to take into account, is that this misinformation phenomenon was so big and it's grown so much in Chile that there is around 14 independent journalism fact-checking initiatives that have like been forced to start working from universities, from papers, from independent organizations, because the phenomenon right now, especially during 2022, was getting out of control. So like, for example, like the main university, Universidad Católica in Chile, had to like put out like fact-checking initiative where they were like releasing everyday reports saying like, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake, this is real, to be able to combat these like misinformation waves. And yet this still like the result of the plebiscite was 62% in favor of rejecting the Constitution.
Interesting stuff for sure. Not something that we've seen a lot here at CCT. So it was a really interesting topic. Okay, so I'm going to keep us moving with Jahnavi Mukul is going to present her work on reimagining big technology companies as nation states, which is another fairly novel approach to viewing this issue. So Jahnavi, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Erica. So I'll just get right into it. The central argument of my paper is that while there is no clear ideal understanding of what a cybersecurity structure in a global governance model would look like, big technology companies need to be accorded some space in the same. It argues this by recategorizing big technology companies as nation states. This is done to underscore their importance in global cyber governance. However, it is also important to note that the reimagination of big tech companies does not elevate their status and they remain non-state actors. Therefore, the paper also uses neoliberal institutionalism as a basis to understand the role that these companies may play in a global governance structure. My research outline has three main pillars. First is to understand big technology companies as net states that operate as nation states. Second is global governance around the issue of cyberspace. And third, as I mentioned, is the importance of neoliberal institutionalism in international relations. Next slide, please. So these four pieces form the cornerstone of the theoretical background of my paper. Firstly, Alexis Wachowski's article defines net states as digital non-state actors. Net states have largely three characteristics. First is that they are largely online. Second is that they have international devotees irrespective of traditional nation-state boundaries. And third, that they are above the law at times. Now, considering this definition and applying it to Benedict Anderson's idea of imagined communities as nation states, is that nation state essentially is an imagined political community, and it is imagined both inherently limited and sovereign. This is because even citizens of the smallest country or conceivable nation will never know most of their fellow members. Yet in their mind of each of these citizens lies the image of their communion. Therefore, Anderson classifies these as imagined communities. Now the categorization becomes of net states and imagined communities as nation states becomes important, because even in net states, which become successful due to its users trying to look for newer identities, all users will never know of each other. The paper uses this basic theoretical structure to classify net states and refocus their importance as nations. Going on to the third piece, the liberal school of thought in international relations focuses on non-state actors' role in global politics. Scholars such as Helen Milner and Andrew Moravishik have worked on situating non-state actors at the center of international politics in the wake of globalization. Helen Milner argues that while understanding international politics from a systemic level, neoliberal thought accepts the importance of states and their decentralized environments, but this paradigm also insists on the relevance of non-state actors and acknowledges a wide variety of such actors. The last paper by Hurrell and Lobato focuses on cybersecurity as a result of an interplay of practices among different stakeholder groups. The authors establish how private companies position themselves vis-a-vis the interests and practices of other actors interested in shaping and influencing what falls under the label of cybersecurity, and understand the strategies that they have devised for doing so. The foundational ideas of neoliberal institutionalism can easily be extended to growing ideas around the global governance of cybersecurity and, by extension, the cyberspace. What is particularly important is the focus on global diplomacy by big technology companies, which becomes key when considering big technology's role in global governance. Next slide, please. So quickly going over the case study for this paper, which is Meta. Meta is a cluster of social media networks, including Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. Taken individually, each of these social media platforms have over 1 billion active users per month. Across its three biggest platforms, Meta has established an idea of community. Meta fits Benedict Anderson's definition of nation state perfectly. This is because there is an idea that while you will not know every member of your nation state, you are still bound together by being in the same community. Here, the virtual platform acts as a space that provides proximity between people, allowing people to connect. Even if there is no understanding of knowing every person on the platform, there is a sense of community and sameness which binds the users in this net state. Thinking about the relationship that exists between Meta and different countries around the world is also crucial when considering the role that it plays as a nation state. By developing its own bilateral ties that are separate from the country that it is headquartered in and where it is primarily developed, Meta has been able to easily transcend the physical borders of the United States. In an article for The Verge, Casey Newton talks about Facebook's tier list, which places countries in categories according to their importance to Facebook. Newton writes that Brazil, India, and the United States were placed in tier 0, the highest priority. Facebook set up war rooms to monitor the network continuously. They created dashboards to analyze network activity and alerted local election officials to any problems. Similarly, Germany, Indonesia, Iran, Israel, and Italy were placed in tier 1. They would be given similar resources minus some resources of enforcement for enforcement of Facebook's rule and for alerts during the period directly around the election. This proves that just as traditional nation states build relationships and place importance on their partnership with certain countries over others, Facebook operates similarly. Siglick and Herring, in their paper, A Multi-Stakeholder Foundation for Peace in Cyberspace, write that while there has been an idea of multi-stakeholder relationship and participation in global politics, there is at least one critical area where the multi-stakeholder model has not been embraced, which is the issue of international peace and security in cyberspace. Instead, leading dialogues on the issue at the United Nations and elsewhere have largely remained exclusive to states in line with an interpretation of internet governance that focuses on technical layers. Even with the idea of the neoliberal model, which emphasizes on the role of non-state actors, there is much reluctance on involving private companies as part of any governance structure. The authors also mentioned that considering cyberspace, states have looked to their historical sovereign responsibilities for peace and security in the connected world as a model, rather than examples of other areas of internet governance. Next slide, please. So one of the major disadvantages of allowing big technology companies to be a part of governance structures is that often they are the organizations that increase the need for tighter regulation around the internet. One of the most important concerns around the regulation of big technology companies that has emerged in the last few years is the control they exert over people's data. The tracking of information has become a large governance issue, especially with the unevenness of these policies around the globe. However, it is important to note that this paper does not argue for a need to elevate these firms to an equivalent status as nation states. By highlighting the operation of Meta as a new age nation state, it becomes evident that it holds greater power in the digital age. Therefore, what is important to note is that these firms need space as observers to whatever global organization develops to govern the cyberspace. In an article for the Bloomberg, Ben Short highlighted that for all its limitations, the Westphalian vision of sovereignty remains a useful lens through which to assess the emergence of brands as global players in their own rights. He further writes that the United Nations currently grants observer status to some 120 intergovernmental organizations and specialized agencies, from the Sovereign Order of the Malta to the International Seabed Authority. Doubtless, these bodies do admirable work, but is the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean vastly more vital to global democracy than Twitter? Or the International Telecommunication Union more unifying of international telecoms than Google? Therefore, as the nature of the digital world evolves, so should the membership of global organizations. Benedict Anderson also states clearly that in an imagined community, the ties between people are so strong that they are willing to go for war for their communities. In the context of big technology companies, to accurately assess their importance, is this classification of an imagined community appropriate? I argue that it is. The global economy inherently relies on various factors of the digital work operating to their fullest potential. In the digital world, it is undeniable that the work of big technology companies supports livelihoods in a manner that is difficult for society to now untangle from. Businesses rely on the operation of Instagram, Amazon, Facebook Marketplace, etc. For example, in India, one of the world's fastest growing economies, over 1 million businesses use Amazon to sell their products. Around the globe, communications take place through WhatsApp, connecting physically distant people. In Brazil, WhatsApp accounts for 98.9% of penetration rate among global messaging applications. This roughly means that 9 out of 10 messaging application users engage with the app. While there was a time when these operations could have taken place offline, that no longer remains the case. Therefore, while going to absolute war over these imagined communities might not be a feature of online net states, the over-reliance that people have on these communities and platforms underscores the importance they place on these communities and how they would want to continue being part of these communities through its ups and downs. This paper has also highlighted the importance of the liberal perspective on international relations in a way that allows non-state actors to have space in governance structure. At the end of the day, this places importance on the role of international organizations. While thinking about these organizations, it is difficult to understand how they could effectively govern cyberspace. Many governmental structures have come and gone, and it is difficult to imagine how opposing ideas for cyber governance can be accorded in any international organization. However, what is important to highlight is that international organizations do not merely regulate on a given issue. They provide a platform for dialogue on various issues, which provides an intangible role in highlighting problems that may not be discussed otherwise. An important role of international organizations is also the way in which they set global agendas, emphasize on issues of importance, and urge countries to take actions in that area. International organizations are also important as norm setters who highlight model behavior around a given issue. The practice of naming and shaming is also a popular one in international structures. If big technology companies become observer members of such conventions and organizations, it will be easy to highlight the issues in their operations and make governance more transparent. Therefore, opening structured dialogue is the primary reason this paper argues for including these companies' presence in global organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahnavi. All right, so pulling up our, I just want to add a quick note on, oops, sorry, my mouse is a little click happy here, I apologize. One of the reasons Jahnavi's article was selected is that there is a huge discussion right now in the community about how do we regulate big tech. Coming from the perspective of American politics, we like to hold it into one, it's American and American only, and any other country's involvement, we don't want it. We're going to do it our own way. The reality, as Jahnavi says, that these social media platforms and these media platforms go far beyond geographic borders. What's being allowed to happen in China with Meta is different than what's being allowed to happen in the United States. TikTok is another great example. You look at individual countries that are banning TikTok, and some of ByteDance, other companies as well, and how that's becomes really convoluted really fast when there's a different set of standards across geographic borders for a organization that doesn't exist in geographic borders, where they do business does not exist in geographic borders. So it becomes a whole lot more convoluted. So I think it is an interesting perspective. I think we hear nation states attached to social media platforms and we all get terrified, to be completely honest with you. But I think it is a interesting approach to extending that conversation.